Oh, now it's turned off. You might know the word for the original language of early Buddhism and 2,500 years ago. The word for suffering is dukkha, and that's in Pali, the language of early Buddhism. And you may know that or not know that the root of the word dukkha for suffering, which can be translated to stress, uneasiness, unsatisfactoriness, meh, all right. It has two parts, du and ka. And du essentially means wonky, not so good, nah, not so good, du. And then ka is the meeting of an axle in that agricultural society and the hub of a wheel. So in effect, dukkha, ordinary human suffering, a lot is a kind of wobbly grinding. Things not quite right, like a dog can't quite find its place, me not being able to quite get the microphone jack plugged in properly, being stuck in traffic, not being able to find that parking place. The sweater that you saw on sale is no longer on sale. It's no longer available. Kids don't phone home as often as they ought to, speaking personally. Things like that. So anyway, wobbly grinding. I always thought that was a very cool way to think about so much of human suffering. So I thought what I could do, I'm getting an echo here. Any way to tweak that probably. I figured they're used to the sound in this room. I thought I could talk a little bit about the relationship between the mind and the brain, and then use that as a way into doing a guided practice with you, and then open it up for some questions and discussion. And we'll end sharply at 7 o'clock with a little social activity down below afterward. So my own background is I'm a neuropsychologist. I'm a methods guy. I produce a little research, I consume a lot of research, but mostly I apply it in practical ways, trying to help real people. And in that larger context, I've gotten very interested in how you can use your mind to change your brain, to change your mind for the better. That's based on the idea that when neurons fire together, they wire together. In other words, the nervous system is designed to learn from our experiences. So as we have, happy feelings or sad feelings, that gradually changes our brain one way or another. And the results carry with us wherever we go. There's a saying in Tibet that I really love, I think about often, sudden awakening, gradual cultivation, sudden awakening, gradual cultivation, sudden awakening, gradual cultivation. It's this idea that we have openings, insights, experiences of various kinds that are like a kind of awakening. But then what's important is the embodiment of them, the internalization, helping them really sink in so they make a difference for us that lasts over the long haul. We might be having a beneficial spiritual experience or an insight, a moment of gratitude, a sense of being cared about by other people, but if it somehow doesn't sink in an embodied way to produce some sort of lasting change in the underlying physical basis for human consciousness, well, it has no lasting value. It was a momentarily pleasant experience, a moment of gratitude, a moment of closeness, a moment of accomplishment, a moment of relief and safety, but it had no lasting value. So I want to talk with you tonight about simple things you can do to encourage cultivation, that aspect of practice. It's not the entirety of practice, it's not the entirety cultivation, it's not the entirety of healing or ordinary well-being and effectiveness or self-actualization or spiritual life, but it's a major aspect. How do we basically help ourselves have a growth curve as time proceeds this way that's like this instead of like that? Or in some cases, we know some people maybe who seem to have a declining growth curve. They know less when they're 50 than when they were 30, but anyway. So how do we actually do that? And one of the takeaways from the modern understanding of how we change and grow is that we have a brain that's very good at learning from bad experiences. It's like Velcro for the bad. It's quick to learn. Once burned, twice shy. Never forget. That's what scientists call the brain's negativity bias. On the other hand, we have a brain that's relatively bad at learning from good experiences. Ordinary experiences of gratitude, connection, self-worth, feeling cared about, connection with the divine. Ordinary, experiences like that, the brain's slow. at learning from those, because those did not tend to have immediate survival value as our ancestors were evolving. So we've got this brain that's good at learning from the bad, but bad at learning from the good, even though learning from beneficial, wholesome, useful experiences is the primary way to grow that which we want to cultivate, to become into that which we want to be. And so you can help yourself, which is what I'll do with you momentarily in about 15 or so minutes of practice here. We can help ourselves let the good lessons of life land. Let the ordinary moments of beauty, of ease, of worth, of grit, determination, resilience, understanding other people better, becoming more skillful interpersonally. We can help the good lessons of life land and stick to our ribs by doing some very simple things that tend to be very enjoyable, which is a bonus benefit. Since neurons that fire together wire together, the longer they fire, the more they wire. So the more that we kind of marinate in these beneficial experiences, 5 seconds at a time, 10, maybe even 20, the more they're going to sink in, the more we're going to learn from them, the more encoding in neural structure there's going to be. Stay with it. Protect it. It's interesting to watch your own mind. It's often oddly difficult to sustain a wholesome, pleasant experience like gratitude for more than a few seconds in a row. It's like the mind wants to wander, or it's afraid of feeling good, because when you feel good, then they whack you and you feel bad, right? Or life whacks you. So helping it last longer, helping it become even more intense, giving the mind over to it, so this experience of self-worth or contentment or even tranquility can pervade the mind and be fuller. The more intense the experience is, the more we learn from it. In other words, the more it gets encoded, the more it sinks in to our body-mind. Also, the more we feel it in the body, the more that it's emotional, that it's sensory, the richer the experience, the deeper the learning of it. And so this all sounds probably pretty fancy, but it boils down to 4 words: have it, enjoy it. In other words, look for those opportunities for beneficial, authentic, wholesome experiences. And then when you're having them, either because you just notice you're already having them, which is common, or occasionally deliberately create them, like deliberately creating feelings of loving kindness or cultivating insight. When you have those experiences, don't waste them on your brain. Enjoy them. Stay with them. Let them sink into you. And then see how that works for you. My personal observation is that if people say to themselves, okay, I'm going to try this half a dozen times a day, less than half a minute at a time, less than 5 minutes total a day, spread out in the flow of my day, just dealing in life, I'm going to look for those little opportunities to register some kind of beneficial experience. Seeing something that's beautiful around me, a sense of awe, friendliness with somebody else, having fun, being playful, looking at these gorgeous flowers, feeling grateful for flowers. Wow. And then if I just stay with that experience, 5, 10, 20 seconds in a row, at the end of that day, I'll bet you, at least the price of one of my books, of course they don't cost that much, but anyway, I'll bet you that you feel different at the end of that day than a typical day. And accumulated over 5, 10, 20 days can make all the difference in the world. So, that's my spiel for the moment. You want to try something? Guided practice? I said it was okay to do a practice with you. So, I'm going to do something about 15 minutes long. As with any practice, feel very free to go your own way, do what you want, ignore me entirely, stay with something. And what I'm going to do is offer a few suggestions of factors that are known to support steadiness of mind, to help you sustain a kind of open, spacious awareness. And then after a period of quiet, in terms of just open, spacious awareness, then I'll offer a few suggestions toward the end of the practice about opening into some wholesome experiences and sensing that they are sinking into you as you sink into them. And then we'll finish it up. You can do this with your eyes open or closed. If you find you're starting to fall asleep, it's okay to stand up. Find a posture right now, if you like, that's comfortable and yet also supports alertness. So here we go. So if you can, coming home to a sense of presence with yourself. Checking in with your experience, what's going on. Attitudes, feelings. The body. Sounds. Finding something to anchor attention, commonly the sensations of breathing, while also feeling very free to choose something else, which is often the case for people who've had painful experiences, particularly traumatic ones, to use something besides the breath, such as sensations in other parts of your body, like your feet or hands. Or resting attention on a word, such as peace, or a feeling such as kindness or compassion, or gratitude. I'll refer to the breath, but know that you can choose your own object of attention. Seeing if you can sustain awareness of a single breath. Complete cycle of inhalation and exhalation, or the equivalent, with a different object of attention. One full breath. I'm going to offer a few suggestions that support the underlying neurology of steadiness of mind. So my first suggestion is finding some warm-heartedness, bringing to mind beings that you care about, and also being aware of beings who care about you. Gradually moving from the idea of these various beings to a resting in a general sense of feeling loved and loving. You can explore other aspects of feeling loved or cared about that are less intense, such as simply being included, the feeling of belonging, or the feeling of being appreciated. Finding your way gently, without strain, into a place of people care about me, beings, including my dog, care about me, and I also care about others. The feeling in the body, in the heart of this. My second suggestion, while letting the sense of being cared about move more to the background, and also the sense of being caring, my second suggestion is to help yourself, without strain, open into, as much as you can, feeling as safe as you reasonably can. Recognizing the ways in which you are in a protected setting. Being aware of any needless guarding or bracing or vigilance or anxiety, and letting it go. Helping yourself feel safer and safer. Thinking of things like others in this room, even those you don't know, who would help you out. Thinking about resources in yourself, your strengths, your credit cards, your credentials, all of which you could draw upon to take care of your needs for safety, so that you can help yourself feeling safer and safer, so that you truly can afford to soften and open and let go of unnecessary defendedness. It's an interesting exploration, letting go of unnecessary anxiety, including subtle apprehensiveness, uneasiness. And then in the third suggestion, see if you can get a sense of your whole body breathing. In other words, as you breathe, there are sensations throughout the whole body. Seeing if you can get a sense and sustain a sense of being a whole body as you sit here. Not attention flittering from one part of your body to another, but being the body as a whole, a single, unified, perceptual experience in terms of its sensations. What's it like to sense yourself as a whole body in an ongoing way as you breathe? And then, for some minutes here, on the basis of whatever steadiness of mind you've cultivated so far, see if you can stay with your object of attention, such as the sensations of breathing, for 3 minutes in a row. Helping yourself become absorbed in your object of attention for 3 minutes straight. If there are little bits of wandering attention, that's normal, but coming back as rapidly as you can. Giving yourself over to your object of attention, being devoted to it, receiving it, renouncing all else for the next 3 minutes. So that was 3 minutes. And continuing the practice now for a few more minutes. See if you can find anything that seems beneficial or wholesome in your experience. Perhaps a sense of relaxation, or quiet, or well-being, or love. Pick one thing that's wholesome or beneficial in your experience and open into it. Letting it become your new object of attention. If this wholesome experience seems to want to change into something else, that's okay. But deliberately opening into one wholesome thing after another, if there is a change. Or you could sense it as opening into a loving peacefulness that has one aspect or another. One thing, loving peacefulness, with many aspects perhaps. See what it's like to give yourself over to the wholesome. The wholesome could simply be a vast open spaciousness that's very peaceful. It could be a sense of your connection with everything. Whatever it might be, for the last couple minutes of silence here, opening into whatever is wholesome, taking refuge in it, giving yourself over to it, letting it inhabit you. letting it become you. Okay. Start coming back. Sustaining whatever's beneficial in your experience while also letting your eyes slowly come open. Feeling your feet on the floor. Maybe moving just a little bit. A teacher of mine once said that we should be with our practices like the runner of a race who goes, maintains her momentum, let's say, through the tape of the finish line. And rather than just suddenly snapping out of it. I think sometimes in my own history, I would snap out of a meditation like changing a channel, from the Serenity channel to ESPN or Fox News or the War Channel or, wait, I'm going to go back to the Serenity channel. So this is okay to sustain the Serenity channel. So thanks for putting up with all those suggestions. I prefer silent meditation myself, but there is a place for guided practice sometimes. I wondered how that was for you. And if you had any questions about the 3 suggestions I offered for steadiness of mind, or anything I've said so far, or anything else that you'd care to talk about. People sent me a whole bunch of questions, most of which had to do with the mind-body problem. God help us, literally. But anyway, that's the solution to the mind-body problem right there. Or anything else you want to talk about. I think they're going to run microphones. I don't know who the microphone runner is, so the whole room can hear you, if you don't mind. So I'll call on you if you have your hand up, and they'll bring you a microphone. It's like an ice cream cone. Put it close to your mouth, as you probably know. Say, who'd like to comment or ask a question? How was that for you? Great. All right. Front row, right here. Do you see? If you keep your hand up. Keep your hand up. There you go. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I couldn't help but think of, I don't know if you know the work of Lee Brasington.
Yeah.
And talking about the jhanas,
yeah.
right? And the state that you were describing that we were invoking seemed very much like the first jhana to me, the state of joy and bliss that becomes sort of not caused by anything.
Okay. You want me to comment on that?
Yes,
all
please.
right. So, a couple things. First of all, the jhanas are these non-ordinary states of awareness that were well known in the Buddhist time, and the 4 jhanas that progress from one to the second to the third to the fourth constitute the right concentration, wise concentration, pillar of the Eightfold Path. So that's what the jhanas are. And people describe them or define these states in different ways. Generally speaking, they're described as a markedly, even radically non-ordinary state of awareness. And it's possible that we have like micro-jhanas, just whoosh, whoosh. But generally speaking, my own take on them and my own teachers in the tradition in which I stand, if it, how can I put it, if it doesn't feel like Toto, we are not in Kansas any longer, it's not yet the jhanas. It could be part of them or factors of them or an entry in, but it tends to be not the whole Megillah, because we want to really respect the whole Megillah. It's a significant shift. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of what you were saying, but again, people can use words differently. That's how I'm going to use that word. All right. Most people, if they do access those states, tend to do that at the end or as part of a significant amount of sustained meditative retreat. Often sitting on top of a history of contemplative training. Although some people, I think, literally are walking down the street and boom, they're having a jhana experience. Or so people vary, but that said. Then the part about the bliss and so forth. It is very interesting that of the traditional practice in Buddhism, of people who are perfectly willing to be very ascetic, perfectly willing to have 1 meal a day, sleep on the ground, be cold, walk barefoot across, a couple hundred yards of gravel, just part of their daily rounds, unpleasant, whatever, right? It's very interesting that of the 5 identified factors of these jhanas, these radical states of absorption, whose purpose, among other things, is to steady the mind as a support for radically liberating, penetrating insight into the nature of experience. Not into any particular content of experience, but into the nature of experience altogether as transient, made up of many parts, arising dependently, and empty of any absolute self-arising. Okay. So the factors of these very powerful, highly regarded, states include applied attention, sustained attention, bliss, joy, and singleness of mind. So if you think about it, 40%, 2 out of 5, of the jhana factors involve intense positive emotion. And this is in a tradition in which people are perfectly prepared to not experience much positive emotion. So why is happiness skillful means? For deep states of absorption, let alone for other things as well. And it illustrates kind of a broader point about the relationship between the mind and the brain. It's a nice example, so I'll talk about it a bit. And it's very relevant for personal practice. One of the major transitions for me in terms of my own practice, really, I'm jumping a significant level the last 20 or so years, was working more with positive emotion. Not being so afraid of positive emotion, Paradoxically and interestingly, as we internalize pleasant, enjoyable, beneficial experiences, we wire them into ourselves increasingly, so we cling to them less. Cultivation undoes craving. Craving typically comes, craving itself, the so-called cause of in the Second Noble Truth, the cause of suffering. Craving itself arises dependently. Upon which does craving depend? What causes craving? Broadly defined. Craving fundamentally, certainly in neuropsychological terms, is a drive state based on an underlying sense of deficit or disturbance. So repeatedly internalizing a felt sense of fullness instead of deficit, and also a sense of balance instead of disturbance, gradually enables us to deal with life in a fuller and fuller way without tipping into the problems of craving. That's really pretty amazing. To take the cultivation and internalization of beneficial states of mind, which are usually enjoyable, because our ancestors evolved reward systems that flag beneficial experiences. They're usually enjoyable. To open to the good, as you know, to how good it feels to be grateful, or to recognize you got something done, or to feel close and connected to another person, or to have insight of one kind, or to feel calming or steadying or tranquilizing of the body-mind altogether, to recognize the pleasantness of these experiences, their enjoyability, and to repeatedly kind of marinate in them as a major, not all, but as a major resource in your own path of awakening. Yahoo! That seemed like pretty good news. It doesn't surprise me that the Buddha, for example, was known as the happy one, because he was happy. It wasn't just the absence of suffering equals blank and numb. It is like joy and love and deep, profound inner peace. Like, wow. So in that context then, why in the world are these two of the 5 jhana factors, bliss or rapture, and joy? Joy in a continuum from happiness to contentment to tranquility. And it's useful to appreciate that there's a continuum there. Really fast here. If we're going to steady our minds and really concentrate on something, right, just including the breath and then tipping into ka-wham, like a jhana state or the equivalent. Some, in other traditions, different kinds of versions of this might be called samadhis or just breakthrough states. If we're to do that, we're steadying our mind on something. Well, in neurological terms, steadying the mind means sustaining the representation of something, one thing, in the neural substrates of working memory, which are in the upper outer frontal parts of your brain. That's kind of like where RAM, computer RAM, in the brain is located. Right? The hard drive's all over the place, but that's where the RAM is. Okay? So if we're going to sustain concentration, let's say, on a feeling of compassion, or on the sensations of breathing at the upper lip, or union with the divine, or an angel, or a deity figure of some kind, whatever it is, if we're going to sustain that absorption in that one object of attention, it means that the gates to working memory have got to stay closed. So what keeps the gates closed? It involves a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine tracks experiences of rewards. When we experience steady dopamine, the gate to working memory remains closed, and we sustain focus on whatever's there, because it's rewarding enough. If reward levels drop and dopamine levels drop, the gate opens. So then we're opportunistic. We're looking for other rewards. Okay? Monkeys that we are. And on the other hand, if the dopamine spikes, like an even better reward opportunity, the gate opens again, because we've got to be able to see that other opportunity. To use an analogy that came from a paper written by neuroscientists at Princeton, so it's their analogy, not my analogy. Imagine a monkey in a tree who's, eating bananas, and there you are in this tree eating your bananas. Plenty of reward, no need to think about other trees. So the bananas start getting used up in this tree. Right? Dopamine levels drop, experience of reward drops, and you start looking around for other trees. That makes sense. Or also, there you are, eating your bananas in this tree, plenty of reward, eating bananas, and a really cute monkey swings onto a branch nearby. What bananas? How you doing? What's your sign? Wing! New reward opportunity. Dopamine spikes, gates to working memory go open. So think about it. If we're experiencing bliss and rapture, bliss / rapture, or joy, happiness, intense contentment, even intense tranquility, it's a sustained rewarding experience. So we're getting sustained dopamine, which keeps the gate to working memory closed. And if the experience is intense, luscious, yummy, oh my God, this feels so good. This peacefulness, tranquility, can be an intense experience if it fully pervades the mind. right? In that case, the reward experience is really high. Dopamine's at the top of its range. It's hitting a ceiling, so it can no longer get a spike. That's an example of why, pragmatically, I think 2,500 years ago, and even prior to the time of the Buddha, people figured out that intensely positive emotional experiences actually helped steady the mind for purposes of concentration and spiritual liberation. Isn't that pretty cool? And it illustrates the broader point that there's a relationship between what's happening underneath the hood in the hardware and what we experience, even in seemingly profound spiritual states. Other comments, questions, wild cards? Great, please. Right there. If you keep your hand up, he'll find you. That's great. Thanks for putting up with the microphone.
Just a question. What's the difference between memory and working memory? I mean, you said working memory, and I thought, oh, memory in the past and negative stuff. And then I thought, well, does he mean that? Or what? Why'd you say
Yeah, that's great. I should have said that. So what is working memory? In a sense, working memory is like the sort of chalkboard in the brain, in the mind, where whatever we're aware of right now sits there. And then we're maybe, like, let's say you're trying to think about what to do for dinner tonight. Okay? Italian, Mexican, Chinese, fusion. What should I do? So you go out to deep storage and you pull up those 3 restaurants you're thinking about. Kind of one after the other. They pop up to the chalkboard. Maybe one comes in, the others go away, and you think about them. And then you maybe think about different options, costs, driving distances. And the net of all that is you pick a restaurant. But there's this movement back and forth between deep storage and then what we're actually focused on in this moment. So that's what I was just trying to say. And so if you're focused on, let's say, the sensations of breathing here, and you're becoming increasingly absorbed in them, that sensation of breathing is what's being represented in working memory. And in my example, for which the gates are kind of closed, as you become increasingly absorbed in it. Yeah. The takeaway is to not underestimate the power, in many kinds of ways, of rewarding, rich, wholesome experiences. It's not that we're denying the bad. We're not, in fact, it's precisely because we recognize that life has pain, life has suffering, life has wobbly grindings, life has challenges. Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people, right? There's a lot of stuff out there to deal with, okay? And there's a lot of poverty. You know, we have what, 1 in 5 kids in America living below the poverty line. 1 in 4 in my home state, California. I mean, crazy stuff. So there are a lot of challenges out there. Precisely the harder a person's life, the more important it is to look for little opportunities to take in the good, a dozen or so seconds at a time, to encode and wire resource experiences into our body, especially into our nervous system, headquartered by the brain, so that we can take these resources with us increasingly. These inner strengths we're growing inside, we're cultivating wherever we go. You know, this focus on internalization of positive experiences is not some kind of Hallmark card, sentimental, California. You know, I know you guys are rugged East Coasters, most of you at least. No, it's based for me on a very tough-minded recognition of how hard life often is. For some people, it always is hard. And also a tough-minded recognition of the brain's negativity bias, the way it really fast-tracks painful experiences, but slow-tracks positive ones. It's precisely because of that I've gotten interested in positive neuroplasticity, the internalization of beneficial experiences in a very skillful, steep learning curve kind of way. Okay. Other questions, comments, practical situations? Hand in the back. She's keeping her hand up. I love that. Good.
Recently I've been thinking about dopamine, and
I
was
feel
just
for
wondering if you
you.
could talk about...
Don't worry, it'll pass.
Talk about dopamine in the sense that how do we get more of it?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, aside from taking a pill,
Yeah.
and maybe aside from running a marathon or having an orgasm,
Yeah.
What is it that we can do, or what's happening in the body to create dopamine? Or do we have a limited supply of it? Does it die off with age? I don't know. I've just been curious about dopamine.
There's a lot about it. A couple things. So dopamine's a chemical, right? And increasingly, people are finding that dopamine is only a little bit involved with the experience of things being enjoyable. It tracks their enjoyability, and it especially tracks expectations of reward, and violations of expectations of reward. But the actual feeling of drinking water when you're thirsty, say, or having your cat crawl into your lap, or your granddaughter give you a hug. I love you, Grandma. Those experiences are, neurochemically there's a lot involved, but some of the primary neurotransmitter systems are the natural opioids. So given what I'm reading as your interest, you might be looking into those natural opioids as well in terms of good feelings. Oxytocin also, in terms of especially social experiences of closeness. So in terms of dopamine per se, there's a lot of interest in that, including with regard to Parkinson's, because as people have Parkinson's, the supply of dopamine depletes. So dopamine is a chemical built from other chemicals, neurotransmitters. I think tyrosine and phenylalanine are precursors to it. There's some research on supplementing tyrosine or phenylalanine to see if you can get more effective dopamine. It doesn't seem to be very effective. It's unlike supplementing 5-hydroxytryptophan or tryptophan, which are the precursors to serotonin, which is the target of most antidepressants. There does seem to be pretty good evidence that supplementing reasonable amounts of tryptophan or 5-hydroxytryptophan, being thoughtful about it, and if one is already on an antidepressant, definitely checking with your doctor first. But that does seem to have some benefit for supporting mood, particularly with mild to moderate depression. And there's a lot that's been written about that. Not many studies on it in America because the drug companies cannot patent tryptophan or 5-hydroxytryptophan. It's also good to pay attention as a detail around mood to iron and vitamin B6, which are cofactors that enable this metabolism from tryptophan to serotonin. Serotonin being a neurotransmitter that supports mood, sleep, and digestion. So that's a kind of a detail about that. It might be relevant for some people in the room. But it doesn't seem, it looks hard to do that with this kind of thing. Going to your health food store, where you can buy tyrosine or phenylalanine at a health food store, I'm assuming in Virginia probably, certainly in most states, but it doesn't seem to help much. One thing I think can help is not so much the production of dopamine, but increasing receptors for dopamine. These little docking stations, where the molecules of neurotransmitters come in and then set in motion this kind of domino cascade of actions as a result. And I suspect, I've never seen a study on it, but I suspect it's true, that mindfulness training, heightening sensory awareness, or related things like sensory awareness training, including for people who are heading into Parkinson's, that training in awareness, subtle awareness even, of little subtle states or little distinctions between states, or the lusciousness of a raisin in your mouth for 5 or 10 minutes. Like, oh my God. I remember being on retreat one time, having tahini and stewed prunes. Oh my God. I was like, talking about orgasm. It's like, oh my God, because I was like so aware, right? There you are on retreat, your mind's really quiet. You see like a grain of sand just glittering in the sunlight. Wow, it's like you're on LSD. Like, wow. Anyway, so like that. So I would just say that about that. I've also just remembered now that for people with Parkinson's, often, I believe it's true, I got to double check this, I think, that exercise, significant exercise, can really help as well. It seems to release that stuff. Okay, that's that. Hey, any more questions related to spiritual practice? Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I recognize you.
Oh.
No? Sorry, right there. Thanks.
Yeah. The Buddha spoke about unshakable deliverance of
You're
mind.
the person who wrote me that question. Good for you.
I thought I would ask it because I didn't know if you would get around to it.
Oh, good for you. It's right here. Please.
Yeah, so he spoke about unshakable deliverance of the mind. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that from the point of view of neuroscience and the healthy brain that is always in activity. How would you speak about that?
I think it's a question that interests me personally deeply. I kind of work backwards. I think, what in the world is going on in the brain of a Buddha? If you operationalize it, which in Buddhism, especially the original teachings of the Buddha, as best we can gather, in the Theravadan wing of Buddhism, Southeast Asian, sometimes called Vipassana, although in a way that's a misnomer because Vipassana just means insight, and all branches of Buddhism and of course other traditions value insight. That said, the mind of a Buddha is operationalized as one in which greed, hatred, and delusion, and the sense of and belief in an I inside, a kind of unified, stable entity inside, that does not persist at all in the mind. There might be some very brief sense of not liking something or really wanting something, but it passes really, really quickly. Okay? Given how much our brains and our ancestors' brains evolved to be frightened by or angry at what's unpleasant, and how much they also evolved to chase after things that are pleasant and get really upset when they lose them, right? And also how much our ancestors evolved to cling tight to us and fear and dehumanize and hate them. Given that, the degree to which the brain is designed to suffer and crave in order to pass on genes that pass on genes, what in the world is going on in the brain of a Buddha? If you don't, if you know a little bit about neuropsychology and evolution, and you don't feel like, what the heck, you're not paying attention, right? So how do you actually do that? And I think you start, for me at least, with the premise that, yeah, in the Buddha's time, and thousands of people since then for sure have gone all the way, and some of them alive in our time today. And certainly many people have gone very far down that road. How do they do it? What's going on? How do you actually do that, right? So that's your question. What is that unshakable deliverance of mind that you're referring to? And
can it actually be discussed in terms of neuroscience, or is maybe it a whole different entity?
All right. Okay, this is good. So I'll try to be succinct. So here we go. So you work back. I work backwards. I operationalize it. I say, okay, what would have to be the case? What are the conditions? So it's reverse engineering. What would need to be the case such that someone could encounter that which is unpleasant or pleasant or heartfelt or neutral without it ever, as the Buddha put it operationally in very psychological terms, without ever invading the mind and remaining. Without, these are called the feeling tones, or in psychology, the hedonic tones of experience. Unpleasant, pleasant, neutral. Personally, I think there's a fourth Vedana, a fourth hedonic tone, call it heartfelt. Unpleasant tends to activate our needs for safety, served by avoiding harms. Pleasant tends to activate our needs for satisfaction, served by approaching rewards. And heartfelt tends to activate our needs for connection, accomplished by attaching to others. See that kind of overarching model? Right? So it's normal in life to experience, unpleasant, pleasant, heartfelt, and neutral. That's normal. There's no way around that. In his own life, as best we can gather, the Buddha described experiences of pain, including social pain, at losing loved ones. So there's no way around the hedonic tones of experiencing. The question is, what's our relationship to unpleasant, pleasant, heartfelt, and neutral? And particularly when things are really intense and really hard, can we be in relationship to these hedonic tones of experience in a way in which we are untroubled and not relating to them with frustration and disappointment and drivenness, greed, in traditional terms, also not relating to them with fear or anger or helplessness, hatred in traditional terms, or I would add, implicit in a lot of Dharma, I think, not relating to things that are heartfelt when they don't go our way, with envy, shame, jealousy or vengeance. How do you actually do that, right? So I think there's several things that really help that to happen that become increasingly internalized over time. One is the thing I've already said. Through repeatedly internalizing the felt sense of fullness instead of emptiness, or deficit, balance instead of disturbance, we increasingly become able to feel unconditionally peaceful even when things are unpleasant. We increasingly become able to feel unconditionally contented when things are pleasant. That becomes our relationship to what's pleasant is shaped by feeling already full, already contented. Our relationship to what's heartfelt, including rejection. Can you believe it? I got a 1-star review on Amazon. Like, what's wrong with these people? Because Amazon didn't deliver their Kindle effectively? Like, I'm joking, but you know what I mean. So being able to have that kind of experience of social rejection, social shame, exclusion, and so forth, again, on the basis of already a deeply unconditional felt sense of love, feeling loved and loving. So number one, cultivation of these beneficial, wholesome experiences 10,000 times, 10 seconds at a time. That to me is one really important thing, because that's a very huge factor of equanimity, right, in our relationship to these hedonic tones. I think that's incredibly important. And a lot of spiritual practitioners are great meditators, but deep down inside they feel like they've got a huge hole in their heart. And you push them outside of their comfort zone on retreat or on their zafu, wow! They're not that easy to live with, work with, sleep with, eat with. It's not a pretty picture, So, okay. So that's, to me, one thing, the internalization of the wholesome. So we gradually we just relate to things on this basis of goodness. Okay, that. Second is to really gradually release the sense of being that unified self. More and more realize that I is a fictional character, that there really is no basis in experience, and definitely no basis in our neurology for the common presumption in ordinary, life, as well as in Western philosophy and psychology, that there really is a unified, enduring entity looking out behind the eyes. And we gradually, increasingly, lose a sense of that. We remain persons. Persons who have needs, persons who have rights, persons who love, persons who want their sports team to win, persons who are happy when their kids get into some grad school, recent experience for my wife and me. Persons who assert themselves, but that doesn't need to presume that there's some entity in there that needs to identify with things or possess them or take life personally. So I think that's the second big thing that happens. And I think related to that, a third thing that's really useful and characterizes sustainable awakening, is really feeling carried by love. You look at all the great teachers across traditions, Brazilian shaman, Christian saints, Jewish, what do they call them, tzaddiks or something like that, holy men, women, people. They just tend to be full of love. They're carried by love. They're awash in love. They are love. You hang around them, you feel like they're like a Wi-Fi generator of love. Like an airport base station, there's a love, zzz, so I think that. And then the last thing I would say is that, related also to the sense of not self, not presuming a self in there is a sense of kind of, being one with everything. And I think about this quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj, a great non-dual teacher in India, who said, I think, wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I'm everything. And between these two banks, the river of my life flows. We're done right there. Da-da. There's sort of no problem. There's this recognition that this person, and certainly the experiencing, the phenomenology associated with this local person, are nothing but transient patternings of allness. Non-binding patternings of allness. Moving patternings of stillness. And so I think that's what I would say. And those characteristics don't require any reference to the transcendental. Those are entirely psychologically operationalized. They're no small accomplishment in terms of human development, especially the upper reaches of human potential. But we haven't yet gotten to the transcendental. But I'm going to go there. It's unity! Anyway, so one last thing. All right, so people differ about this. And I myself am comfortable, personal views are personal views, it's okay. I think it's really clear that in certainly theistic traditions like Christianity, Islam, shamanic traditions around the world, and Hinduism and others, Judaism certainly, that in these various traditions, full awakening is described as a kind of God consciousness. It's not just some kind of extraordinary psychological Olympic athlete equivalent personal transformation. It has to do with some relationship with the transcendental. In other words, for sure we know there is mind. We know there is hearing. We know there is knowing. You can't deny that, right? And we infer from phenomenology, hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, thinking, that there is also matter. We're solid there. Most people would go, yeah, mind, there is, squirrels are having experiences, humans are having really sophisticated experiences, and there's some physical basis as well. And there are rocks, there's stars, quarks, weird stuff. Okay, fine. Is there also mystery? Mind, matter, mystery. Right? So the theistic traditions would say that full awakening involves being really given over to mystery, known as God, the divine, Brahman, Dharmakaya, Buddhakaya, and so forth. Okay? There's a lot of debate currently, especially as to whether the Buddha himself said that some relationship with the transcendental was involved in awakening. Personally, I think it's crystal clear that he did, because he spoke about the deathless unconditionality, that which is unconditioned, that which is where nothing burns, nothing fades, that things that are changing are an unreliable basis for lasting happiness. That was his deep preoccupation. How do you find a reliable basis for lasting true happiness in a world of endless changes, right? I think he did talk about, and you can see the descriptions of the movement through the 4 jhanas and then the 4 formless jhanas, the so-called 8 jhanas, in his own awakening, moving into cessation. To me, he's clearly describing some kind of encounter with unconditionality, with the transcendental. And in such a way that someone who does that, in his own accounts of his own awakening and the description of other people and his instructions as to the path that one should follow, that it did involve some kind of radical, beyond words, accessibility to the transcendental, after which a person is irrevocably changed. And my own personal model of awakening involves this. It's one in which, I do my personal practices inside the natural frame of mind and matter, aimed at gradually dusting off or clearing the cement off of the stained glass windows so that the light that was always already there can shine through more brightly. And that's my own notion of awakening.
Thanks.
Becoming increasingly accessible to unconditionality and that sense of freedom and peace that's available there, always just prior to the next moment of emergent actuality, eternally now. Think about what is it like to be at the emergent edge of now, eternally, and what's just prior to. And you can kind of have an intuition. You can't think about it, because as soon as you think about it, you're informed. But you can kind of intuit it. And my hunch is that people who are really far along, especially all the way kind of cooked, you can kind of just look in their eyes. It's like, they just, you know what I mean? They have this sense of, they're like a lacy permeability to unconditionality. And lived into this world, but with this fundamental sense of freedom. Because that which is conditioned is no longer free. Deep waters. A couple more people? A few more people? Hands starting to happen? All right, the popcorn. It's going.
So this is
but we have to end now. No.
Fascinating. And in addition to the looking in their eyes for evidence, can you speak some to other evidence that you have found for maybe changes in the actual brain?
Oh, the brains, yeah. Thanks.
That show the positive unconditionality
it's really
being represented.
So, you know, we all have our list of people we'd love to get in an MRI, you know, right? I won't go political here, but I'll just talk about, you know, like Eckhart Tolle, like, what's up? Or, you know, Adyashanti Pemachodran, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh for me is just remarkable. And there are a lot of people who are just not very well known, but wow, they're pretty far along. And so what's interesting, though, is the people who have been put into the MRI, mainly through Richie Davidson's lab at the University of Wisconsin, are longtime Tibetan Buddhist meditators. And what's interesting is how similar their brains are to everybody else's. Because they're hearing, they're tasting, they're thinking. You know, much of the brain is about regulating the whole body. Their heart's still beating. Their digestion is proceeding. Their brains don't seem that different. There are a few interesting differences. And yet these differences are also found in people that don't seem completely awakened. Because it's not that common to find someone who's really, really far along, especially who's willing to put up with getting flown to Wisconsin, stuck in an MRI, you know, like hanging out in God oneness bliss, you know. Like, you know, okay. So, but one of the interesting reliable findings, and for me, all this is, like, there's a place for the gee whiz, like, oh, wow, isn't that cool? But, you know, because I'm still suffering, I'm interested in practice, right? And I want to help people who are suffering with practice. So how is this useful? So just a quick recap. In terms of things we can develop ourselves every day,